Well, welcome to Thought for the Day. Terry was talking yesterday about that wonderful little verse in the Proverbs that says that as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. It made me think about how sharpening takes place, which is why I brought you out here this morning into my garage. Please excuse the mess. That's just how things are. And today, these days, generally when I'm sharpening things, I use a grinding wheel. And as you can see, I'm not very skilled at it, which is a good thing. I've got a grinding wheel. Even there, I've done a reason. I got this knife a little bit sharper. I hope you're able to see that. But because I'm not skilled, I have to use a grinding wheel. In the Bible times, they didn't have grinding wheels. They probably had something more like a sharpening stone, which we sharpen like this, and like this. Sorry, like this, and like this. And it required a lot more skill to use a sharpening stone than a machine, like a grinding wheel. But I suspect that if this verse is right, they didn't really even have grinding stones. This is a very special material. This grinding stone is made of. I mean, it is metal, but it's very hardened steel, probably way better quality than they had. Maybe they sharpened on stones, but the verse says that as iron sharpens iron, so maybe they just sharpened iron against other iron. And it's much more of a mutual process, isn't it? It made me think of scissors. I don't think how scissors work. Let's put them around for the camera. Scissors actually sharpen each other as they cut, because the two sides of the blade bear against each other and sharpen each other. Now in the end they get blunt, or if you put something metal inside and then you can blunten them. But there is a natural process of iron sharpening iron. So whenever you use a pair of scissors, you can think of this verse as iron sharpens iron. And they sharpen each other because they work together. They are held together by the hinge in the middle. And it's iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. But the thing I actually spend most time sharpening isn't knives, but saws. This is a saw I've had for a long time. It's a very good saw. It's stayed remarkably sharp. It does need sharpening from time to time. Now and the thing about sharpening a saw is I can't just take it over to the grindstone. If I turn the grindstone on and bring my saw up against it, that wouldn't do the job at all. Because in order to sharpen a saw, you can see that I'll need a file of just the right shape to go between the teeth and sharpen each tooth at a time. You go every other tooth like that way. That way. I'm not very good at it. I mean, if some of you know better how to sharpen any of these things, do tell me. But you have to use a file. But there's something even before I use a file, because if you look along a saw like this, if you look along it, you'll see that every other tooth bends in different directions. So one tooth bends to one side and the other tooth bends to the other side, and sometimes they get flattened out, and then they need to be, before you sharpen them, they need to be bent back to the right angle. There's a special tool for doing that. I'm not sure I've even got one myself. I normally borrow one from my dad when I need to reset a saw. And maybe that reminds us of some people whose lives are so bent out of shape that actually, before much sharpening can take place, they need to have themselves put back at the right angle, put back into right relationships. And once they're in that right relationship, then that process of sharpening up, one step at a time, patiently sharpening, that we can do for each other, can start to take place. But actually, before any of this can happen, there's one other thing we need to do. We need to take the tool, the edge, the knife, the saw, out of its packet. This saw came with a cardboard sheath, and for many years I always kept it in it. It protected it. It kept it sharp. It's fallen to pieces now. I don't have it anymore. Some kitchen knives come with a plastic cover, don't they? If people are carrying knives, they'll carry them in a sheath or a scabbard attached to their belt. And before you sharpen it, you've got to take it out. And I think that's a message really, because I suspect that very often we don't sharpen each other. We don't allow anyone to sharpen us because we never take our protective layers off. For a little illustration, on Monday, a few of us, Terry was another, were talking about quite a difficult issue. Well, not that we were arguing or disagreeing, but it was a difficult issue to talk about and difficult to know how to express our concerns about it. But the light really went on. What really allowed us to start engaging with each other was when one member of the group was quite vulnerable about their own experience, told about things in their own life and how they'd engaged with it, not just thinking about it, but in living it out, and made themselves really quite vulnerable. And in that vulnerable, and that taking off of the outer protective layer, something quite special happened, and we started to be able to really sharpen each other up. And I think that's the point. Not only can we not be sharpened unless we take our protective layer off, unless we expose some of those deeper things to each other, but we can't sharpen others either unless we make ourselves vulnerable. There's another verse in the Proverbs, actually in the same chapter as that one about iron sharpens iron, just a few verses earlier, Proverbs 27 verse 9. It says that perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, but the pleasantness, the blessing of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. Or actually, advice is the most recent translation. Many of the other translations talk about counsel, and I think that's helpful. But advice is telling someone what to do. Counsel is something deeper. It's wisdom that we ourselves have learnt, and it's from heartfelt counsel. It's all very well to bash people over the head with advice. You should do that. You should read this. That's not iron sharpening iron. That's just emotional abuse at its worst. Iron sharpens iron is when it's a mutual process. It's like those scissors working together. It's when it's heartfelt. It's when we start to share things that we ourselves have learned, often the hard way, from the heart. That's when we really get to sharpen each other. And it happens in the context of friendship. Friendship where there is mutual trust, where there is openness. We take the covers off. We let the edges, we expose the edges to each other, and iron will sharpen iron. Let's be those sort of people as we are church together over this weeks and these coming weeks and months. So may God bless you today.